Alright guys, this video is going to cover objectives 1 and 2 of chapter 4. So we are moving into tissues. So the last lesson focused primarily on the cell level. And this chapter is going to focus on the next level of organization, which is going to be tissues. And so we're going to cover 7 objectives. Once again, this video is going to cover 1 and 2. And so in general, what is a tissue? A tissue is just a collection of cells that work together. And along with the cells, we have what's called the extracellular substances. A lot of times this is referred to as the extracellular matrix. And it's going to be one of the defining characteristics of our tissues is what is outside the cell, what kind of materials will you find there, how much of it do you have. And so that's going to be an important concept when it comes to tissues. Now we have to study tissues microscopically typically, and that study of those tissues is called histology. And then sometimes in order to study them microscopically, we have to do what's called a biopsy, and that's where they have to surgically go in, or with a needle, they go in and take a tissue sample that they can then study under the microscope. Excuse me. Now, in our bodies, there are 4 main types of tissue. We have epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous. And so each of these are going to have some unique characteristics and functions based on the cells and the materials in that extracellular matrix that they have. And so just kind of an overview of the 4 tissues. We have epithelial, which typically cover and line. And so anytime you see epithelial, you're talking about an outside cover of something, or you're covering the inside of something. And so they're going to be your linings, they're going to be on the outside of organs, they're going to be your skin, the outermost portion of your skin at least. They're going to be lining the inside of your organs as well. And then connective, like the name sounds, they are going to be connective, they are going to be connecting things, so they bind cells and organs together. But there's actually a pretty wide variety of connective tissue, and so they're going to have a variety of functions to go along with that. They can protect, like in the case of like bones. They can be supportive, like some of your connective type tissues that are like ligaments and tendons. You can have insulation, you can have transport. There's a lot of different functions of connective tissue. Muscle tissue is going to be for movement. And then nervous tissue is going to be transmitting nerve impulses. And both of these types of tissues are excitable. They're able to respond. In the case of muscles, they're going to contract. And in the case of the nervous tissue, when it gets excited, it's going to allow those nerve impulses to be carried along those nerve cells. And so match the description with each tissue type. So epithelial, cover and line. Muscle tissues for movement. Connective is going to bind and connect and support. And nervous tissue is going to allow for responding to our environment and kind of regulating everything through electrical impulses. And so there's going to be our matchup there. And then blank is the process of removing tissue. That's going to be a biopsy, while histology is the microscopic study of tissues. All right, so that wraps up objective 1, just kind of an intro. And so objective 2 is about tissue membranes. And so a membrane is just a thin sheet or layer that's going to cover or line. And so based on that definition, it makes sense that most membranes are going to be formed from epithelial tissue, which pretty much their main job is to cover and line. But we could have some connective tissue involved as well in these membranes. And so we have 4 types of membranes. One of them is external, and that's essentially going to be our skin. And then we have 3 different types of internal membranes: mucus, serous, and synovial. And so the cutaneous membrane is just our skin. It's an outer layer of epithelial tissue. It's what we call the epidermis. And when we cover the integumentary system, we're going to go into great detail about these 2 layers of skin. And then deeper, we have a connective tissue layer as well, known as the dermis. And so this main job of this external membrane is going to be to protect us from the outside world and to help keep things like water in. Our next membrane is a mucous membrane, which it makes sense that the secretions of a mucous membrane is going to be mucus. And you will find these membranes in areas that are going to open to the outside. So mucus is all about kind of acting as a barrier. It's going to be a first line of defense. And so any passageway or area that opens to the outside world may have these mucus producing cells and tissues, so that way the mucus can help trap them and keep them from going further into the body. Your mucous membranes could be single cells called goblet cells, or they could be multicellular. All right, your serous membrane, we've actually talked about these before. We looked at this in chapter 1. And so your serous membranes are those that are going to line the cavities, and they're also going to be on top of the organs, like in our thoracic cavity and abdominal cavity. And they are a combination of both epithelial, which are going to be the outside linings, and the inside linings. And then there's also going to be some connective tissue. And so these are going to be your pericardial, pleural, and peritoneal membranes. And so we talked about before how you have the visceral that's going to be on the organ directly. So if it's the heart, it's the visceral pericardium. If it's the lungs, it's the visceral pleura. If it's in the abdominal area, it's the visceral peritoneum. And then you have the lining of the cavity itself, which is going to be the parietal. And so in between you have that space. And so these serous membranes are going to secrete serous fluid, which is what's going to fill that space up and help to lubricate and keep those organs from rubbing together. And they're also going to help hold them in place. So your serous membranes, like we talked about before, once again, they're going to be a combination of 2 types of tissue. And then your last one is synovial membranes. We haven't talked about these yet. We will when we get to our joints, because synovial membranes are going to be found in freely movable joints, like the elbow and the knee, and they're going to produce synovial fluid, which is going to help when those bones kind of move against each other. It's going to help to keep them slippery and ensure that our joint movement is going to be smooth. And synovial membranes are going to be connective tissue. So there's just kind of a breakdown. You have your external, which is your skin. You have your internal. All of these are going to be secreting fluid of some type and protecting those internal organs in some way. And so which of the following is an external membrane? That is going to be our skin, the cutaneous membrane. Which type of membrane secretes synovial fluid? That one's pretty simple. And then what membrane lines body cavities that exit to the outside of the body? Remember, anytime there's an opening to the outside, we're going to have mucous membranes, and that way that mucus can help trap things from getting in. All right, we're going to stop there with this video, and we will continue on with our first tissue type in the next video.